Hey, this is Bryan.
And Shelby.
And you're listening to the Hyperspace
Pod Blast. Aren't you a little short for a podcast?
Huh?
Okay, today on Hyperspace Pod Blast, we're gonna have a whole bunch of people here.
I have no words.
These things just come to me like out of the blue. I don't practice this at all, believe it or not.
That's good, because if you practiced and this is all that it was, I'd be a little disappointed.
Anyway, for those of you that listen to our Star Wars 101 episode and our East Coast correspondence, what did we call you?
I like to say the Hyperspace Pod Blast Senior East Coast Correspondence.
So anyway, Mike and Hannah are back. If you if you haven't listened to that episode, we highly recommend it. It was really interesting, and the reason we brought them back is because we wrangled a couple of their ex-students, and now we're going to drill them with tough SAT-like questions about Star Wars.
Exactly.
No, not really.
Star Wars trivia, here we go.
Okay, so why don't you guys just introduce yourselves around, I assume, the table.
Hi, I'm Molly.
Hello, I'm Maya.
I'm Michael.
I'm Hannah.
Hello, we're who we always are. Mike and Hannah, why don't you guys give us the quick and dirty about the class, just in case there are people that haven't listened to that episode.
All right, well, Mike and I teach a class called Star Wars and Contemporary Myth, where we use Lucas's original 6 films to look at theology, mythology, the hero's journey, philosophy, morality, all through the lens of Star Wars. And so Molly and Maya were members of our inaugural, hey, let's see if this works.
Guinea pigs.
Class.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
And then the class moves towards them doing a final project where they take the level of analysis we do in the class and apply it to something in the wider world of Star Wars, either the old expanded universe or the new Disney canon. And Maya and Molly's work was always fantastic. So we have two. Do we want to say ringers here? Exceptional? Like
Rock
that? Yeah.
stars.
We brought you some of the best.
Oh, I'm flattered.
So, Maya and Molly, how would you describe your Star Wars fandom before and after adopting an academic approach to the content?
Okay, well, I'm Maya. Pretty much, we were actually talking about this yesterday. I'm pretty sure I came out of the womb to Star Wars. I can't remember a point in my life where I didn't know what Star Wars was, and I have a brother who's 3 years older than me, and so he saw Star Wars for the first time when he was like 3, so I was an infant. Yeah, I used to run around and play with lightsabers in a diaper.
Nice.
It was just always there. Like, obviously the original 6 films, like, I just always had those, and they were just literally a part of my life. And I didn't think super deeply about it, but, you know, like, I was very connected to those, and those were, like, my childhood characters and my childhood movies. And so, obviously, I nearly peed my pants when I was like, oh my god, they're coming out with new Star Wars. Like, freaked out.
And you, Molly?
Well, I guess for me, like, the first time I watched a Star Wars movie, my 2nd grade teacher was, like, very obsessed with them. So he made my class watch, like, all of them, like, starting with episode 4 and then going back to the prequels.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was like when I was first introduced to them, so I just sort of like accepted it as like a thing that like everyone experiences Star Wars, but I never really thought about going into it deeper. It was always just sort of like, yeah, it's a movie, stuff happens, it's a good movie.
So I think what you've said is kind of going to lead into this next question, but did the class like fundamentally change the way you view Star Wars, and if so, how?
How about Maya, you start us off?
Yes and no. Like, there was definitely a lot of stuff that, again, I just hadn't really thought about, I suppose. A lot of the theological stuff, you know, I kind of had an idea of it, and I'd already had Michael in class, and I knew Hannah for a while. So we'd had these discussions already previously before the class, but it was definitely, I guess, the best part of the class would be more the fruitful conversation that we got with everyone else's opinions on, like, all of those different takes on everything that we talked about. All the philosophy and the theology, hero's journey, all that stuff. I think it was more people's opinions that actually led to that. And obviously, you know, all the conversation was guided by these lovely people. But I think it was really kind of having everyone's input and everyone's prior knowledge, because it was, you know, the people who, like me, came out of the womb to the Force theme, and then people who had, like, never seen Star Wars before. So there were a lot of different opinions and a lot of just different views, because for some people it was brand new, and for some people it was stuff that they just always kind of knew and was just a part of their growing up, I suppose.
Awesome. How about you, Molly?
I would definitely agree. I think, like, actually taking a class about it, I don't think about it differently so much as, like, deeper. Like, especially because there are people who are, like, at different, like, stages of, like, having watched the movies or, like, read anything from the extended universe. Because I feel like the conversations I would have with my friends or with my brother would end up being, like, the same sort of conversations. Whereas, like, if you have different perspectives or people who have, like, just, like, read it or seen it for the first time, it's sort of, like, new and different. And so you can end up talking about things that you hadn't thought about before. And because we were talking about, like, theology and the hero's journey mixed in with that, I think it was a lot fresher.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds like it was as much changing or adapting other people's views to your own Star Wars point of view as much as it was specifically things that you discussed in the class. Am I reading into that correctly?
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty close.
What elements or scenes in The Last Jedi stood out to you that you may not have liked, or maybe you may not have disliked or noticed before taking this class? So, you know, how did this class change how maybe you viewed The Last Jedi?
That is SAT level question. Holy smokeroli.
Don't feel any pressure, given the fact that your teachers of this class are sitting here with you in the conversation.
Yeah, no pressure. Whatever.
We're excited.
Yeah, we're not looking for validation in this.
Yeah, whatever. You guys, whatever.
We think we're pretty great anyway, so we're just excited to hear your answers.
Yeah, I was going to say, you really literally can't tear Michael down anyway. I don't know Hannah that well, but like Michael, I just assume walks around with like theme music in his head, like do 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 do. Michael is the best, the best. Nobody can do things like he can.
Yeah.
We have to talk about you recording that for me, and maybe a longer version, so I can start my classes with it, because that would be fantastic. You could write one for both of us then for the Star Wars class too, so there could be like an additional version.
Awesome.
Probably the biggest thing, the class helped me to, like, notice things when I saw The Last Jedi. In the class, like, we talked a lot about, you know, the different parallels from the original trilogy to the prequels. And so then to go and see Last Jedi, you know, all the parallels between Last Jedi and then mostly Empire Strikes Back. But then, like, even the bigger parallels, like, I was geeking out the other day with Michael, actually, about, like, all the parallels in the prequels. The Jedi, they become, you know, super powerful, and they're like, oh yeah, we're the Jedi and we're great. And then they get this clone army and they're like, we're gonna fix the world and get rid of the Sith. And then that's not how balance works, so that kind of blows up in their face, because they just don't have the realization and the insight to realize that balance is light and dark and not all light. Then, you know, flashing forward chronologically, you get to Luke thinks that he can train all of these Jedi and he's gonna rebuild the Jedi Order and it's gonna be wonderful and it's going really well. And he just gets kind of cocky about it. And then he's like, oh no, Ben Solo is kind of getting a little dark on me. And so he freaks out, and then that blows up in his face. And then flash forward a little bit more to when Kylo Ren and Rey are with Snoke in his fancy little throne room. Snoke is so cocky that he's correct and he knows what's going on and he knows what Kylo's going to do, that he doesn't even realize that there's a lightsaber that's about to impale him.
Mm-hmm.
I guess seeing all of the different parallels was probably the thing that from the class impacted me most when watching, really all the new movies, but specifically Last Jedi. I would say it's probably the parallels. I geeked out a lot about them.
Right on. Yeah, I think that's something, I mean, a lot of people in our circle anyway, you know, the people that basically hang on every word and try to interpret, well, we think that he said there instead of our because, you know, or something like that, you know, but it's interesting to see people that were, as you said, sort of, I'm going to do my famous air quotes here, regular fans, interacting with the content in that sort of way, because it's cool that it's not just the us weird super fans that, you know, can appreciate those kind of things.
Okay, then. So what do you think, Molly? Well, how did this class change your viewing of The Last Jedi?
I think for me, like, the one thing that I was really interested in when I was first taking the course was when we were talking about, like, the hero's journey and, like, Anakin's, like, redemption arc. And I think my brother and I were talking about this earlier this week, comparing, like, Anakin to Kylo Ren, just because I feel like when you go to, like, a Star Wars movie and, like, you see all of, like, the action and the explosions and the space fight scenes, and you go home, you can be like, okay, that was a good action movie. Or, like, the way that we looked at it in the class, as in, like, what is the bigger, like, picture of, like, the balance between, like, light and dark side. And so, like, I think when I was watching The Last Jedi, what I was really focusing on was, like, Kylo Ren and sort of that battle within him, and, like, comparing it in, like, the same way, like, the parallels that Maya was talking about to, like, what Anakin experienced in, like, the previous movies. Looking at that from, like, a more academic perspective was sort of what I was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe even without necessarily knowing, you know, it's not like you went in with a notepad and you're like, well, let's see how many things were similar in this movie to the previous ones. But, all right, so now we're going to imagine that you're back in high school, not like in the terrible dream with no pants on way, but sitting normally in Mike and Hannah's class, and you begin discussing The Last Jedi as a class. What do you think that looks like?
Ooh, a lot of good, a lot of bad. That would, I think that would probably lead to some argument. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People have argued over The Last Jedi? That's crazy talk.
Yeah, I thought it was universally accepted as wonderful.
You know, I think that would lead. I think probably that would lead to arguing. Yeah. Similarly, what did we had a really big argument about? Was it all the new?
Oh, the special editions.
Thank you, the special editions. Yeah, we argued about those a lot. Yeah, I don't know. I feel, well, first of all, the first thing that would have been brought up would be when Leia used the Force and Superman flew back to the ship. Which was a wonderful idea, and I totally see where they're coming from, and I like that it's the first time that you see her using the Force. I think maybe she shouldn't have been so stiff. She looked a bit like a doll, which made it creepy.
That's
like,
actually
because
something.
I really liked the idea.
That's actually something we've discussed. We really like the scene, and like you said, the idea is just of the entire movie, which we both agree was shot beautifully. That scene was we liken it to the old cartoons where you have the painted background, and then you take the clear cell, and you have the guy that's drawn, and you just pull it across.
Yes.
So there's no motion or movement other than him just going like it was like she was on a string just being pulled across. It was,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The way it was shot was our biggest problem with it as well. So I can see that, but I'm sure you're right. Other people would have much harsher things to say about it.
Yeah. Well, because because some people are just like, no, that's awful. Why does she do that? And I was like, well, she's using the Force. like what? The only other thing that really bothers me about that is then that they ignore space physics when she opens the door and nothing happens. And the only way for everyone to not get sucked out is if she's also put up some, like, force field thing there.
A force.
Force field.
A force field.
Force squared.
Or they've shut another door, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, that was the only other thing. But other than that, like, aside from the awkward shooting of it, I liked the idea of that, but, you know, people have issues with that part a lot.
How do those conversations in Mike and Hannah's class usually start? Like, if you had a whole new Star Wars movie to talk about, and you come into class and you sit down, does, like, Mike come up there and be like, so, what'd you guys do this weekend? Like, how does the conversation usually start about these larger scale movies?
With a lot of, like, anecdotal interludes, and then some, like, brief silence until someone says something, and then everyone is, like, very ready to say something afterwards.
Yeah, someone always had to break the silence, definitely. Yeah, but, yeah, and then, you know, inevitably, like, Mike and Hannah would start arguing about things they disagreed on, but then eventually they'd find common ground on, like, one part that they really liked together or really hated together. And then they'd be totally fine, and they'd go back to being like, yeah, that works. But yeah, because we went on the field trip to go see Force Awakens.
Rogue One.
It was Rogue One?
Yeah.
We didn't have
Really?
the class when Force Awakens is what prompted
I
the class.
saw Force Awakens with you then outside of class unofficially.
Oh no, we did the CM thing.
We did the-
Remember,
we
we
did the
watched a
campus-
Star Wars movie every week, and then we took the field trip to see the Force Awakens.
That was just a campus ministry thing. Then we
it
took
just
your
wasn't-
class.
Yeah, the class wasn't involved with the. I see what you're saying.
Okay, seeing Force Awakens with you guys it was just way more traumatizing because Han Solo died, and then I sat there and was like rocking back and forth in my chair sobbing because I didn't know what to do because my childhood hero died, and I was like freaking out, and you guys were like, I know, and you like patted me on the back and you were like, it's okay, we both did this too, and I was like, okay. Yeah. So, okay, we saw Rogue One. Yeah. Which, no, that had a lot of good conversation because when we got back to class, like we talked about.
Oh, the CGI.
Yeah, like we were talking about, first of all, like just the making of the movie was beautiful. That is a beautiful movie to just watch. And then we were talking about, you know, everything that loops back and into A New Hope and like all the brilliance of that. We were talking about the Vader scene for a long time because it's like the best Vader scene ever. Like he just slaughters people. Oh, it was so that sounded awful the way I just said that. But you knew what I meant. Like it was great.
Slaughter equals awesome. Got it.
So much for my positive Twitter.
Yeah, that's interesting. I bet that was a fun one to discuss too because it didn't fall into that saga film pattern. Like you could really take it apart sort of as a separate part of what is kind of considered. Everything else is kind of considered the whole of Star Wars, and they're like, you know, this is there, but it's not there. So plus there was all of that Force religion. I don't know, the different things with the Guardians of the Wills and then the other people on Jeddah that you could, I'm sure, tie into sort of the basis of your school there.
Because as much as it feels like it feels like it connects to A New Hope. You're right. Like from an analysis standpoint, it is completely on its own. You know, I mean, you can take it out and all of those themes just sort of work within the film. You don't need to stretch them out to everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how they do that with Solo. If it feels like a Star Wars movie or if it feels like a sort of sci-fi fantasy movie that they just called the characters similar names.
Yeah. There's a lot of violence over here from you guys. Oh my gosh.
Are we worried about Solo over there? Is that what this?
Hannah and I were not miming
our own deaths.
Yeah, at the mention of the film, we weren't. I
don't even remember what the question was anymore because you guys.
Okay, so we walk into class the day after The Last Jedi. What's the discussion look like? You guys have been around us enough. What's it look like?
I think it would be all-out war. And the people who did not like it that much.
Well, the people who don't care, too.
Right, and then there are just the people who, they don't care, and you'd ask them what their opinion was, and they'd be like, oh, something blew up, that was really cool.
But there's value in that.
Yes, I think so too. Like sometimes I think The Last Jedi kind of proved to a lot of people that sometimes you need to walk in and just enjoy a movie.
That's why we saw it 3 times in the first 18 hours. To be honest.
Yeah, that's
we
why.
We enjoyed it a lot.
Well, the first time we watched it, it was all the anticipation of what's it going to be? What's going to happen next? Like the second time it was like, okay, I've seen this. I can sit back and enjoy the movie. And then the third time it was actually, wow, I've been here 20 out of the last 36 hours. I should really go home and be with my family. But I'm watching The Last Jedi, and it's pretty good. And I'm seeing a lot of different things the third time. So, here we are.
And I think from an analysis standpoint, the multiple viewings is helpful as well. That might just be my justifying my habit of, seeing the movie a lot. But I think once you set those expectations aside, as Hannah just said, and sort of sit down and say, okay, what is here? Because some people, as you said, Shelby, can go in and just enjoy it. Other people sometimes wrestle with their expectations, and then they have to put that aside and they have to watch it in a different way. And sometimes they're cleaning snow off their car because they've been at the theater all day, and they're saying, I don't really know what to say about this yet. I liked it, but I don't really know what that means. And then you have to see it 2 more times.
Well, and I maintain that you have to see it twice before you can really even analyze it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to see it twice.
And maybe you take a notebook without judgment.
No
Did you really
judgment.
take a notebook?
No.
Oh, okay.
I have, though. When we've done field trips, if I want to make certain I have a lesson plan ready, and that's really difficult to take notes in the
I
theater.
remember you talking about that.
Because you're trying to
it's
do it by like
dark.
bright scenes, and you're trying to write, and then you're trying to translate your notes afterwards. And I don't have great handwriting to begin with.
Your handwriting, it takes some getting used to. It's like a whole other language.
I'm pretty sure I would just forget that I was taking notes, like, and just watch the movie, and then I'd leave, and I'd have like 2 things written down, and they would
No,
both
you
be from
can't
the first 5 minutes.
You can't forget because everybody looks at you, and then they ask you afterwards if you're doing this for school and you have some ridiculous professor who made you go to the movies and take notes, and then you have to explain, I am that teacher who's going to ask my
I
students
am
to do
that
this.
teacher.
And
I am that teacher. I imagine it that way. I don't know why.
that's exactly how I say it, Shelby. You captured the moment.
Perfect.
Just the right amount of Liam Neeson gravel.
Finally, we want to ask you, what is one piece of advice, Molly and Maya, that you would give Star Wars fans that you think you learned from taking the Star Wars class?
It would be to remember that this is going to be really cheesy, but it just
Bring it on. Cheese it up.
Yeah.
as the Force needs both light and dark, and duct tape has light and dark side. Like, you need both or else it doesn't work. You
Oh my gosh, the Force is
or like
duct tape.
aluminum foil has like a really shiny side and then a not shiny side.
Mm-hmm.
And those mean different things. For the aluminum foil, I don't know what the difference is, but there is theoretically a difference. So,
I have
But
no
I
idea where
think-
this is going, but I
I
love it.
think that people, like, again, you need to go into the movies and you can do the super in-depth analysis and you can geek out about, all of the beautiful little baby arcs within a movie and then the ginormous arcs with, between multiple movies. And that's wonderful. But you should also, sometimes there is just beauty in just sitting down and enjoying a movie. Like, every time I sit down to watch, Empire Strikes Back, I don't want to analyze all that stuff. That's ridiculous every time. Sometimes I just want, that was a bad example. Empire's a dark movie. I'm gonna go with Return of the Jedi. Never mind. I don't want to analyze all that stuff all the time. Like, sometimes I just want to sit down and just watch it and be like, yeah, this is a great movie, and enjoy it, and then have a little Ewok party.
And you want to sing Yub Nub because that was what they should have left in the
Oh
film.
my god.
Yep.
Amen.
I agree.
Soapbox
It's just
moment
too weird a song.
achieved.
That was
Well.
one of those arguments, by the way. We argued about Yum Dum.
You should, because that was one of the biggest travesties.
I'm never going to look at aluminum foil the same way.
Or duct tape.
Or
I
duct
know.
tape.
Every time I use duct tape, I'm going to pretend like I'm using the Force, and it's going to be amazing.
But yeah, aluminum foil,
Binds
there's
things together.
an aluminum foil, it's the shiny side allows heat, like it keeps heat in. But if you have it the opposite, I think it's that way. If you have it the
Yeah, it's
opposite
something with
way,
heat.
it allows heat out. So one keeps heat in and the other draws heat out. So depending on what side you're using, heat's either going to be pulled out of your dish, like from a light in, or it's going to be maintained. And the only reason I know this is because my husband had a teacher who brought, when his cooperating teacher brought oatmeal, Dave Hetrick, every single day. But his wife really liked shiny things, and so she always put the shiny side out, so his oatmeal was always cold because the shiny side should have been in.
Oh, see? Boom. The Force.
The things
and your
that you
aluminum
learn
foil and duct
on
tape.
Hyperspace Pod Blast.
That's right. Exactly.
You can bind things together with aluminum foil too. It might not work as well as duct tape.
That's true. That's
You
true.
use the wrong type of duct tape. It doesn't do anything for you.
It brings balance to my leftovers.
And let's be
So-
honest, the right side of aluminum foil keeps the government out of your head. So.
Oh, yeah, true. That's...
Molly, what would your advice be?
Maya just stole it from me. I was gonna say, remember what part of the audience you are. Like, there are people who show up to the Star Wars movie and are ready to get into in-depth analysis, and there are people who are there and their friends just drag them and they don't really have a preference, and there are people who are just casual Star Wars fans. And so I guess, be aware of who you are when you're watching it.
Maybe you don't go as far as, saying that duct tape is the Force. I don't know.
That's
Yeah.
Not all
cool.
people do that.
Yeah, that's a 1 in a million there.
Yeah.
I'm glad it happened here.
You
I'm gonna
heard it
wrap
here
myself in duct
first.
tape later and see if I can use the Force.
I think that's a great idea, Brian.
I think it's gonna work.
Well, and I think I'd be negligent not to mention that both Maya and Molly, when we did our final project, chose books and chose novels within the start to write their last analysis for Star Wars on. So that it was they didn't choose to pick something like a film. They both read something. I'm trying to remember if they were EU or not.
I did split them.
They were.
They were both expanded universe bits and analyzed how they fit into the analysis that we'd done in class, and was brilliant.
Because they worked the whole text. I mean, it was, they were both exciting papers to read.
All right, so let's wrap a little bit of duct tape around this episode and say thank all of you for coming, and thank you very much for giving me this duct tape thing that I'm going to use for the rest of my life.
Thank you so much.
But yeah, it was great to have you. We appreciate everything. Hannah and Mike, why don't you tell the good people of the internet where they can find you, and Molly and Maya can as well if they feel like it.
All right, you can find me on Twitter at Hannah, HANNAHL Tatter, TATAR.
And I finally remembered my Twitter handle. You can find me at @my_comic relief. And I'm 97% certain that's right.
And if not, Shelby can do what she normally does, which is just cut and paste the audio clip from a previous episode and put it in there.
That works
That's
as well.
exactly
And you can
find both of our emails on the Mercyhurst Prep website.
mpslakers.com.
You guys crack me up. Well, you can find me if you want positive little daily reminder making Twitter a happy place, one tweet at a time tweets. You can find me at Maya, MAIA, Magirl, MAGERLE. I'm pretty sure that's all it is. I don't really know. Happy tweets. I don't know.
It'll be in the show notes. I'll find it.
Yeah.
Okay.
True.
Awesome. You can find us at hyperspace_pod.
You can email us at hyperspacepodblast@gmail.com.
Or check out our stuff on our website, hyperspacepodblast.com.
And if, like these wonderful students, you want to get into the expanded universe of Star Wars, you can do so without even reading, just by going to www.audibletrial.com/hyperspace. And you get yourself a free audiobook as well as 30-day trial of Audible.
All right. Talk to you later, guys. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
It was good to see you guys. Good to talk to you guys again.
I see you in the Force.
Yeah, I see you through the duct tape.
Reflected in aluminum foil. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.